Hello there and welcome to Black Jackal Gaming. I'm going to take a quick look at how to be a good opponent, different ways of being that guy, just some general gaming etiquette before and throughout a game, playing to win in the right way, and just a little bit of what to do if you are that guy. To start off with, we'll look at some pre-game etiquette. So the first and foremost, personal hygiene. Just make sure when you show up, you've had a shower, you're wearing clean clothes, and you got deodorant on. Especially if you go into a tournament, you don't want to be in a situation where you're in a really hot environment and you're there for 10, 11 hours and you're going to end up stinking. So just make sure you come prepared for that. And if you do sweat a lot, just bring some spare deodorant along with you, freshen up throughout the day. Now, we've all had these situations where we get a little bit hungry and we start getting a little bit irritated and agitated. So before you're going to play your game, make sure you eat some food or bring some snacks with you just so you don't get a bit hungry. One of the big things I've found with some opponents is just know your basic rules. You can't be expected to remember every single rule in the game, core rules and for both armies, but you should know the basic rules for your army, like the army rules and the detachment rules. The basic profiles for your troops, the units you're going to use all the time. You should remember simple things like the toughness and the movement, so you don't have to check them every time you need to use the unit. And if you are new to the game and you are struggling to remember a lot of the information, don't bring lots of different units. Try and double up on units so you have less to remember. It's going to help you throughout the game and it's going to help your opponent as well. Make sure you print out your army list. You can either go on something like on the 40k Battleforge, the app run by Games Workshop, or you can use something like Battlescribe where you can build your list. Make sure you print a copy of this off and a copy for your opponent as well, just so they've got a quick reference guide throughout the game. Before the game starts, just make sure you explain any gotchas, any stratagems that might come up and abilities that they won't be aware of. Just make sure your opponent's in the position where nothing's really going to surprise them and it's up to them to play around it if it is a strong mechanic. When it comes to other people's models, some of these are very well painted, some models can be quite fragile as well. So if you want to have a look at them, just ask for permission beforehand. Most people say yes, then you can pick them up, look to your heart's content, but it's just polite just to ask beforehand if you can touch the models. During the game, there's a couple of things you need to just bear in mind. This is to be a good opponent yourself and just to watch out in your opponent. There can be a fair amount of soft cheating that goes on tabletop games. This isn't blatant cheating like someone rolling the wrong amount of dice or having weighted dice or just claiming that things do things that they shouldn't. This is the more blurred lines, lazy cheating, such as generous movement and measuring, so they're not quite measuring accurately. They're a bit loosely moving, so they're grabbing like half an inch there, an inch here, where ultimately probably doesn't affect the game, but it can build up over the course of the game and have a negative consequence on you. There's also the forgetting of negative effects for abilities they've got, such as if you have a weapon with heavy and then you move, you no longer get the benefit of the keyword of heavy. Sometimes people can forget this and fire on the ballistic skill with the ability rather than just saying I've moved, therefore I will no longer gain this ability. You also might have the odd bit of AP appearing every now and then. Some rogue AP can pop up when people are using different types of detachment rules where they activate in different times or abilities, and just misremembering what AP is actually on the unit. So you might have 0 AP units becoming 1 or 1 AP units becoming 2. Some things that are easy to forget but also easy to forget that you're forgetting. So just keep an eye on that throughout the game, including yourself when you're looking at your own abilities, just to make sure that you're playing the game as it should be played. Make sure that both players are keeping score. If you're relying on one player keeping score, then there can often be times when it comes up where someone is thinking the other person's adding a couple of extra points on, or forgetting that you scored the secondary hero there, and the score might not reflect the entire game. So if you both keep score, and you keep score at the end of every battle round, then everyone's on the same page and you know where you're up to. Just make sure that you remind your opponent of the rules and set up a situation where they remind you of the rules as well. Just a bit of common courtesy. So if you forget that a unit has a special ability that they've told you about and you then move within range of this unit, such as the Hexmark Destroyer and Necrons, if they just let you know that, you know, this guy has an ability where he can overwatch on a 2+, if you remember that, you probably wouldn't move within range of him. So just remind them that you've got this ability, and if you move into that, he is going to use it. So they're fully informed on the decisions, and then they repay the favor to you later on in the game. When you're playing the game, just make sure you allow takebacks. Don't be that guy that, you know, someone moves the unit and then instantly they go, oh no, actually I forgot, I need to stay here to score this secondary. Can I move it back? Just let them. Don't be a douche, because they will repay the favor. If you treat someone fairly, they're always going to treat you fairly back in most situations. There's a certain length of time that you can let takebacks happen if it's in the same phase, or someone wants to do an action and they haven't shot, so you let them do it out of phase. It's okay, just let them have it. We're all here to have fun. We want to win, but at the end of the time we both want to have a good game. There's certain situations when it's too far in the game and they might want to give a take back and it's influenced too much, so you're well within your right in those situations just to go, at this point in the game I think it's going to have too much of an impact, so at this point there's nothing we can do about it. When it comes to rolling dice, make sure they're rolled out in the open. Don't pick them up too fast. Let your opponent see what's been rolled, and just make sure that it's in a fair and open environment. And most importantly, don't blame your dice. I know we all like to do it. We're rolling a D6 attacks weapon and we're always rolling that 1 or 2. We use the re-roll and it's still a 1. It sucks. Dice spike up, they spike down, and we always remember them when they spike down. So just bear that in mind and try not moan about it too much. So once the game's all over, it's always important, if you've won, be a gracious winner. Don't rub it in the face of your opponent. Don't jump up and down cheering. Take it well. And if you do lose, don't be a sore loser. Congratulate the winner. At the end of the day, we're there to have fun for a couple of hours. Shake hands or bump fists. All done. Once the game's over, always be open to discuss what happened in the game. Point out where you went wrong, what else you could have done. Speak to them about their tactics and how they think they could have changed the shape of the game. Be open to advice, but if you are going to give advice, make sure they're open to it beforehand, because a lot of people don't really like unsolicited advice. So just speak generally about the game and gauge the situation to whether there's things your opponents did wrong, that they'll be open to advice on it, what they could do in the future, things that they could bear in mind about your army when they play it the next time. And just general tips about the game, the flow of the battle, making sure you're scoring your secondaries and your primaries, and you're focused on actually winning the game through objectives rather than focusing on killing units, about contesting parts of the ball, restricting movement of your opponent, just generally things to control the flow of the game. I've always been a believer that when we lose is when we learn the most. So anytime you lose or you fail at something, you've got to really reflect on what happened. Don't go down the route of a blame game. My opponent's army was too good, the dice were rubbish, they were really good for him, because you can always look at what you did in the game, the mistakes you made, and what you could do differently, either through your list building or just your generalship in the game. How you contested objectives, the secondaries you chose, how you tried to control the flow of the game, how you took control of certain situations and positions to force mistakes and changes in game plan for your opponent, just your general strategy and your tactics throughout the game. There's always things you can improve, so it's always best to reflect on what you've done first before then you start looking at other things that can't affect what you do in the game. Lastly, we'll come up with some cheeky extras about how you should approach the game, really. So it's about winning in the right way, especially in the casual setting. You don't really want to show up to your club with an overtuned army and just smash everyone in front of you. You want to be able to have good games, close games, games that are going to challenge you as a player and allow you to grow, allow you to think about your tactics, your strategy, how you prepare for a game, because that's how you're going to improve. You need to look at things like proxies. Not everyone's going to have all the units they need. So if you want to use proxies, make sure you just discuss this with your opponent. The odd proxy here and there is fine, but if you're using too many or they're too complex because they've got different You've got different models with different weapons, but each weapon's a different type of weapon they should be carrying, and you've got two sets of units that look identical, but they're both proxy and a different type of unit entirely. It can get confusing for your opponent. So we know it's an expensive game, but we always have to bear in mind our opponent and the easy you can play the game when we're trying to get them to give us a favour at the same time. And when it comes to your general play, try not to play slow. It's a big game with a lot involved in it, with a lot of models, and we want to jump straight right in. But just before the game, just think about what you want to do. Your pre-game plan. What strategy and tactics are you going to use? How are you going to set up? What pressure points are you going to create in the game? How are you going to contest the objectives? What secondaries are going to be suited to your army? You don't want to be spending an hour before the game going through how you're going to play the game, what secondaries you're going to take, and because you haven't pre-thought about all this, you don't know how you're going to deploy, so your deployment and setting up ends up taking an hour, and you might have only had 3 hours set aside, and it's going to be very tough to get a 2,000 point game into a 2-hour window. Make sure you know your rules. There's nothing worse than when you play an opponent, they bring 3,000 different units and they don't know any of the rules. It really slows down the game. It's hard to remember all the rules, but just try and remember basic profiles. Like if you're running Space Marines, most things are going to be strength 4, toughness 4, and they move 6 inches. If you can remember basic things like that, it's going to really help you throughout the game, because every time someone has a question or you're selecting a unit, you're not having to check for basic information like that. You can have different units that require different information that you might need to reference, but for the basic units with your basic rules, you really need to make sure you start getting them down. And when you're actually in the game, don't wait until your turn to plan how you're going to play out the turn. Look at your opponent's turn, and throughout the turn, analyse what he's doing and think about how you're going to counter his moves for the next turn. Where you're going to place your units, how you're going to contest objectives. Don't wait until it's your turn and then spend the next 20 minutes thinking about what to do, being indecisive about where to go, who to shoot at, because you've just had the last half an hour, 25 minutes, 30 minutes of his turn thinking about exactly what you need to do. Because apart from standing there waiting to roll dice or play the odd stratagem, there's not really much else you're doing apart from sitting there watching the game go by. When it comes to playing games, especially at a club, even at competitive level, you want to be the guy that everyone wants to play. You want to be the guy that not only do you have an enjoyable experience, it's a fun game, but it's one that brings out the competitive instinct with you, where you want to beat the person because they're a good player, and by beating them shows that you've gained knowledge in the game about the armies, tactics, strategies, just core mechanics of the game. You've got it down and you're striving to become a better player. You want to be the guy that people want to play because they want to challenge themselves whilst having fun at the same time. You don't want to be the guy that just comes in and absolutely tonks everyone left, right and centre, and no one wants to play you because they don't get anything out of the game. So you want to be the guy that's the centre of the community that everyone wants to play, and even if they lose they don't mind because they're taking something from the game at the same time, and if they do win, well, it's a big pat on the back for them as well. So just bear in mind when you're playing, and when you've looked through all the things we've spoken about so far, just try and be a good opponent. It's two people trying to get the best out of a situation. You're there for 3 hours. Enjoy the game, enjoy each other's company, and try and have a good game. When it comes to a casual game, unless you've agreed beforehand, don't bring a meta list. Don't go on the internet looking at lots of tips and advice how to build the strongest army. If you're showing up to a casual environment, they're probably going to bring more of a casual narrative list. If you come up with the best of the best of the best and absolutely stamp on them, they're probably not going to want to play you again. It's going to leave a bad feeling in their mouth, and they're going to have a negative point of view towards you. And you know what? They might speak to other people and say, this guy they showed up with this meta list, absolutely tanked me, wasn't enjoyable, I'm never playing them again. You don't want to be that member of the community. So if you do want to have a really competitive game, make sure you're choosing the right opponent and you've discussed it beforehand, and you've said, look, let's go as hard as possible, we'll be as competitive as possible, and we'll just have a great competitive game and try and win. Because that way then you've got two more evenly sides and you're both getting something from the game. If you show up with a meta list and all you want to do is win, you're not going to learn anything from it. You've absolutely destroyed an army that probably had no chance of ever beating you. So you've taken 3 hours of your time, and you've achieved nothing apart from getting a win, and they've also achieved nothing as well. So it's not a great position to be in. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any comments, then pop them below in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, then please hit the like button, as it greatly helps the channel. Hit the subscribe button to see any future Warhammer content. Take it easy, and see you next time for more grim darkness from the 41st millennium.